Well, good afternoon, Aristo. It's time for another conversation, and I understand you want to talk about perfection. And we've discussed a few different titles, and who knows what we'll end up with. It'll be one that'll fit the conversation, I'm sure. So, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. It's 8:11 behind your head there on the clock, and it's 3:11 where I am. If you cut the 8 in half, it turns into a 3 with another 3 facing it. So it's an interesting symmetry. Let's hope the symmetry reflects a clarity of this topic because it's not an easy topic to discuss. The point is, the problem is, um, we tend to move into our heads. And because we're talking with words, we're going to be moving into our heads. When I say let's get out of our heads and move into our bodies, I don't mean let's get stupid or just an automaton moving around or stick your brain in your gut or whatever. I mean that the head is part of the body and that the mind is part of the body. Other people think that the body is actually part of the mind. Well, they call it a body mind because everything, all of your cells can be conscious. You can look out and feel out of all of your cells. So there's no such thing as let's put it this way. The ancient Greeks called the body soma. This is the living body that's self-aware. They called the Latins they called the meat body, the dead body, sarca. The Romans called it corpus, corporation. So it's really funny because a corporation, if it was a living entity, should be called ensomatosis or something with soma in it. In fact, in Indo-European, in Sanskrit, soma is the is the moon, but it's also a sacred mushroom that opens up to higher consciousness. So essentially, I'm using this as an introduction to the topic because you cannot understand perfection unless you come from an integrated perspective where your mind and your body,
Where your mind and your body, finish your thought.
where your mind and your body are in a unified relationship. You can't say that they're actually one because there are distinctions. I can say my ears and my body, my eyes and my body are one. They're not one because I'm not a big eyeball, but they're in an integrated, organic relationship, a synergy. So we are synergistic beings, and it is important to adopt a synergistic existential attitude. The word attitude may be inaccurate because attitude conveys a mental thing. It's in your head. You have a mental attitude. It's hard to define a physical attitude. So I read some ancient texts in Kabbalah and yoga and Sanskrit words and Hebrew words, and they use the word stance. In Sanskrit, in Sanskrit, it's asana. It means the seated position or the standing position. It's your position. It's your posture. It's your stance. What stance? When two martial artists face each other, they take a stance. When two lovers face each other, they take a stance. When you have a conviction, you take a stance, a stand. So taking a stance is a more synergistic conception of the word attitude. It's more grounded and you can feel it in your body. And many people misunderstand the word asana as meaning a twisted yoga position, like putting your foot behind your neck or, standing on one leg or something like that, or lotus posture. Yeah. But in reality, it can mean that, but it's an extended meaning that means your overall posture. And in fact, the Hebrew Kabbalistic texts speak of the stance of the prophet, the stance of ecstasy, and the seat, the divine seat. The divine seat is not an actual throne, it's a state of being. So the prophet sought to establish a seat that was in the image and likeness of the divine seat. And this was the vision of Ezekiel with the throne of God and all of these, Christ on the throne and all of these things are also metaphors for this kind of stance. That's an extreme case of what I'm talking about because it demands a certain state of consistent realization. And that's what we talked about in the last video. We mentioned consistency. Now, one can have a mystical experience and then pop out of it and remember it, and one then is best served to enliven that memory in order to come back to the mystical experience to attain a certain, not at the same level, of course, but as much consistency as possible. So it's difficult to understand the state of, somebody became offended because I said, look, if you look at somebody who's suffering, like a victim of rape, and you call that perfect, then you really haven't gone within. You haven't really internalized. When I meant really haven't gone within, I meant haven't gone within in a synergistic manner. You haven't gone partially within. You can have a mystical experience and then all of the world's ills dissolve. Everything dissolves. You know, the Buddhists say that as well. When you enter a certain state of awareness, there is no sin, there is no evil, there is no suffering, there is nothing. But that's in that certain frequency, so to speak. That's in that state of essence. The challenge is not to go into that state of essence. That's what I believe many people misunderstand, and we call that escapism. The challenge is to bring that. Yes. In the beginning, it's not escapism, because in order to be able to bring something in and utilize it as a resource or establish it within yourself, you need to be familiar with it. So, you know, entering that state is not wrong. Just like I would say taking drugs is not wrong in order to familiarize it's, you know, unless they're poisons. But the thing is, it's easy to become either addicted to it, or because the challenge is so great that the path to discovering solutions becomes disheartening. And when solutions aren't available, we opt for coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms basically they get rid of the pain. They address the situation so we don't break under the pressure. All of us have coping mechanisms. Many people might say religion is a coping mechanism. Even the communists say it's the opiate of the people. A painkiller essentially is a coping mechanism. You take aspirin, you have a headache, the pain goes away, you can go about your business. However, if you can take, you know, puff some opium and it's not addictive off the bat. But if you cannot find a solution to what ails you, if you cannot move, not find a solution, but move in that direction, and it's a process, so it can be very painful, and regulate your coping mechanism to the point that you can taper off and increase the solution as the coping mechanism either tapers off or you cut it cold turkey, you can easily become addicted to the coping mechanism and become extremely successful in it. And the problem is a successful coping mechanism in the mind of the individual succeeding in this way is indistinguishable from a solution. You know, just like a drug addict. You know, it takes time for a drug or addict or alcoholic or whatever to realize that their coping mechanism is not really a solution. And even if they do realize it, you know, it doesn't matter anymore, you know, because it's good enough, even if it kills them. Otherwise, existence is meaningless. Otherwise, this big, I cannot face this big dissonance that is so big and so terrifying that you really, you know, part of you can believe that, well, I'm not going to deal with this. I don't care. I don't care if I have to, you know, it's either the coping mechanism or suicide. So I'm here to offer a suggestion, because I don't disagree with the people that say reality is perfect. It's one thing to say reality is perfect. It's like saying humanity is perfect, okay? And it's another thing to say each and every event in reality as a separate entity is perfect. Each and every form is perfect. That's almost like saying, well, it can't change. Of course, that may not be what somebody would mean when they say that, but it's very easily understood that way. If you're going to say something like that, if you're going to use a mystical experience with an audience who, by virtue of the medium is a mental medium. I mean, you're looking with your eyes and you're thinking when somebody is talking. So it's very difficult to be in your body. Plus, the emanations that come from the computer kind of interfere with your nervous system and your energies, and it's very difficult to sustain body awareness unless you've really, really cultivated it. So, keep in mind the audience when you're saying something like that. I mean, I am fully aware of mystical experiences. I don't care if anybody believes me or not, but when I read somebody saying, and it became all love and it became all this and that, I can relate. Even if it's a fabrication or a mental fantasy, I can still, each mental fantasy has a reflection in the true mystical experience. It's similar, even though a lot of the depth may be missing, but you can't communicate that in your head. You have to enter a state where your body energy is so strong that it can make a direct resonance with another person. Sometimes it can be conveyed through words, through the vibration of words. As they reach somebody's ears, they carry subtle information, subtle energy, sometimes through gestures, but often, in intimate relationships, it works a hell of a lot better. But then you have all the resistances come up, and for a reason, because when you're knocking on a door, a closed door, and somebody is not opening the door because they were robbed, you're going to have to deal with what's the password, or you're going to have to convince me on a whole bunch of things. And even if you open the door, they might beat you over the head with a frying pan because they experienced, like you, some cop sticking their foot in the door, barging in and beating them up or worse. The problem is when somebody has suffered, and we've mentioned there have been people on your Facebook page before that mentioned, well, everybody's responsible for what happens to them, even little children. So so everybody reads that and says,
we brought it on ourselves. So that's an
brought it on ourselves.
Not to be compassionate.
Often,
as I see it.
Often somebody says this and says, well, yeah, this is the way it is. To reconcile it with the fact that, well, it doesn't sound compassionate, we say, well, it's all perfect anyway. So I'm very compassionate because it's all perfect, and we brought it on ourselves, so we're all perfect, and who cares if we're suffering? That's the clincher. Who cares if we're suffering? Because if we do care, we're going to feel the pain. So that's the challenge here. Anybody who says the world is perfect and all suffering is perfect can only say that if they're in the middle of suffering and really feel the pain and torment and say this and feel the truth that it is perfect. Perfect means it doesn't have to change.
Exactly.
That's how
it's apply that definition of perfection.
If people don't mean that, they need to express it more clearly. Because, they said, well, we don't need hope. We just need, and I say, yeah, that's a very good attitude. You don't need the crutch of false hope. You need to give yourself encouragement and be able to sustain a sense of purpose. People who have a sense of purpose live longer. That's a fact. People who have a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives are healthier, they're stronger, they have more drive, and they're not subject to conditioning as much as people who are completely purposeless and fatalistic. So the only way to have a sense of purpose is to actually believe in what you're doing, to believe in something, and that means hope. Hope that, hope isn't some,
hope that I can make a difference.
Exactly. But it's not hope. Hope is not devoid of belief. It's not like blind faith in the sense of, okay, you do it for me so I don't have to face it. Again, we come down to escapism and denial. And it's a very subtle dynamic because it's very easy. I mean, you've said yourself how easy it is to get in your head. You think you're in your heart, but then poof, you're in your head. You don't even realize it until something hits you over the head. You do. And something that you could have perceived if you were in your body. I knew somebody, for example, she got in a relationship and, her heart, her mind, her body was telling her, this is bullshit, get out. But then not only her own thoughts, but they were reflected by everybody around her saying, oh no, it's all in your head, which was the opposite. Their ideas were reflecting what was in her head, but the truth was in her body and in her heart. And the world is going to try to keep you in your head. And we often try to keep each other in our heads, partly because things are set up that way. I'm talking through a video which encourages people to be in their heads. And this is why I use a kind of intellectual frame to help connect, to create a kind of connection in a more sensate dynamic. But at the same time, coping is very tempting. We all have coping mechanisms, and it's very hard to distinguish them from healing dynamics. Healing dynamics, however, are body-oriented, sensate-oriented, and they do not avoid dissonance. But they also do not wallow in dissonance. They bring in that love, that hope, that sense of meaning, along with the despair, and put them together. And when you're with a child that's crying, you don't slap the kid or kill it to get rid of the bad. Let's kill the damn. That's what the psychopaths do. Partly the reason that they abuse children is to cut themselves completely off from anything that might connect to deep feeling. And their sexuality is completely numbed out unless they engage in sadism. But the child aspect is still coming up and screaming, and they can hear it. And until that voice completely shuts off, which means we all have to be dead then to shut up the collective. But the point is that you don't kill the kid, you embrace the kid, and you love the kid, and you feel how the kid feels, so the kid understands that you feel how the kid feels. And then the kid will accept your love. The only way the kid's going to accept your love is if they sense within them that you understand how they feel. They're not going to accept your love in a sterilized package mailed to them from far away. They're going to accept your love when it's deep, intimate, when they can trust you. And this is very, very difficult because our shadow doesn't trust us. It's not going to open up easily. Even the victim shadow, even the shadow that calls for help, it's going to set up a set of conditions, of contracts. It's going to do everything in its power. Sometimes it'll just sit there stubbornly until the love begins to penetrate it. So we need to be patient with that. So here's the thing about perfection and how I see it. I firmly believe the universe is good and operating perfectly at all times. And this creates a clash when you experience it in your head, because there are three levels in manifestation. Let's say an equation. You have a trident, right? A trident, and you have one prong, another prong, and then you have the prong that connects the two prongs, like an equation. 1 equals 1. So the prong on the one side is our desire, how we want things to be. And that's the beginning of manifestation. You need to be in touch with your true desire, not what you think is possible, what they told you is practical. If you really want to be lazy and stay home and be fed all your life, think about it. Think of the implications. Imagine yourself being perpetually on the beach with a drink with an umbrella in it, and ask yourself when it's going to be boring, when you're going to get bored and want to do something else. Put yourself in that position and explore when you explore your desires, you're going to realize that your desires are inhibited. Guilt is not an emotion. Guilt is a thought imposed upon your emotional nature to keep it under control. You can't feel this way. Oh, guilty. You can't act this way. Oh, guilty. You can't sense this way. So when you feel shame, that's when you're inhibiting yourself. You're your own police officer. You're your own prison guard. That's what guilt is. When you are threatened by the emotions of others, you project blame. This is to stop them from feeling, to shut down their energy, so we shut down dissonance. And it's occurring on a grand scale in human society for obvious purposes of control. That's the one problem. The stance, let's call it the 3 stances, or better, the 3 frames. There are 3 frames that we need to master before we can manifest. So desire, and then we have perception, the frame of perception. The frame of perception is probably the most obvious one because it's what we feel. The thing about the frame of perception is to really perceive, you need to get out of your head. Keep your head 1/3. I mean, look, let's take the snowman. The snowman has 3 balls. Not 3 testicles, but 3 snowballs, one above the other. And you have the head ball, the snowball of the chest, and the snowball of the abdomen and pelvis. Very hard to put genitals on the snowman with legs and all that, so we'll keep that out of the picture. So the human body has a similar model. So what you want is to balance your energies, 1/3 in your head, 1/3 in your heart, and 1/3 in your gut. The problem is that when we're in our heads, if we think about keeping 1/3 there, we're actually keeping 90%. Sometimes you need to say, okay, I've been in my head so long that I need to just put all my being in my belly. I need to put all my being actually in my root chakra, in my root center. This is where the legs meet in the pelvis. This is the bottom of the pelvic bone. It stems from between the legs underneath an area called the perineum, which is actually an acupressure point. A little above that, it's a neural plexus, but it's more than that. It's an energy field. The chakras are actually of the subtle body. They're electromagnetic in nature. So moving energy from there down your legs and into the earth, we talked about that. The reason is that when you put your awareness out of your head, even below your heart and below your abdomen and below your genitals into the root chakra, you're consciously establishing presence in the physical plane. You're telling, and when you put it in the planet, you're saying, look, I belong on this planet. You can't oust me. There's nothing you can say or do that's going to establish a probability that's going to get me off this planet, that's going to get me off the physical plane. So these days, it's very important to stake your claim. So the attitude or the stance, the position, the posture of our existence needs to emphasize the root chakra. And we notice spiritual people often do the opposite. Get out, we're already in the, no, we're not already in the root chakra. It's actually the opposite. Most of us are up here, you know.
Absolutely.
You know, very few people really feel, because they can't handle it. Oh, it gets me hard.
Most spiritual people that I know are shut down at the lower chakras. I mean, and I have been most of my life, which is why I recognize it.
And it's easy. I mean, all you do is put your attention there. Pretend your breath comes through there and not in your mouth. Pretend that you have a mouth down there and you're breathing. And feel the sensations. And just do that. Make it a point to and don't worry about getting turned on or feeling uncomfortable. Circulate the energy. Don't take your attention away from that. Instead, that's how you root into the planet. Feel that sensation touching the planet, you know, and the planet can respond. And I'm saying this because those of you who fear they're going to kill us, establish a sense of energy, a sense of reality creation, which is a communion with the planet, which doesn't allow probabilities of kill you to enter the picture. Now, the thing is, many of us have moved so much into the head, have engaged in so many outer reflections, there's so much wounding in the heart that it's difficult. But everybody, you know, even if you're an amputee, you've got a butt, you're sitting in a chair, you know, you're in a position where you can do that rooting. And even if you're tired of life, this gives your being the experience that, look, you know, if you enter an after-death state, just saying the world is an illusion, I don't care. I read this on one of your, you know, threads today. You know, oh, I like this view of the perfect world because I realized it's all an illusion. The emotions, the thoughts, it's all an illusion. And it's like, well, dude, you know, the thing is, if you've really gotten into the after-death state, there's only a little part of each of us at this point that is aligned with that mystical truth. The rest of us cannot connect to it, you know. That's why we're coping. We don't know what to do with that rest of us. So it's left behind. Exactly. It's left behind. On the one hand, if you really want to escape, you're never going to escape if you have all these parts that don't connect with that. So that means acceptance of all the shit that you call illusions. That's, again, even the Buddhists and the escapists say that. They say, look, before you really leave the world of karma, you have to integrate all of the stuff that you're not accepting. Even they say that. And then they leave, but they leave the densest part behind, which doesn't change anything. That keeps the world going. The world is going as it is because people have detached from their root chakras, plain and simple. If people were participating in the root chakras, they didn't have to have revolutions. Plus, the psychopaths are causing wars to encourage detachment from the root chakra, because if you're really down there, you know, the Hindu yogis say connect with the root, but don't go deeper. They have exercises where you actually cut your knees, you know, where you cut the energy off your knees and your legs and the earth. And basically, the baseline is the root, you know. The rest is considered underworld, and they're hells, and don't face them and don't touch them. So, you know, obviously, they fear those areas because it's an escapist attitude. And they say, well, if we can escape and feel better, but that's a minority. The true spiritual teachings of integration have been repressed because they're the ones that change the world. And the true spiritual teachings connect all the way to the core of the planet, go through all of the hells, and they're only hells because we're not there. A place in your body only hurts and is tense because you're not participating consciously in its dynamic. It's starved of your attention. If you keep your attention there, if you love it, just like a person, you're in a relationship and you ignore them. Somebody's married, right? And their wife, well, they take care of the kids, they cook the dinner, you come home, then go screw the mistress, and you ignore her because she works on autopilot. That's good enough for you. Your body works on autopilot. It's good enough for us. Well, it ain't going to work. That's why we grow. Growing old, so to speak, is not a curse of nature. At this point, it's a necessity because nature says, I'm going to support your DNA until you've had an opportunity to maybe have children, to maybe live a little, to realize what life is about. You get to if you can realize 555 by age 25, that's all you got. Maybe it's not enough. But after that, by age 40, you got to start considering that you need to pay attention to your body. And even people health oriented know that. But basically, paying attention to your body is not servicing it mechanically by eating the right things and just doing the right mechanical acts. It is actually being in a love relationship in your own being at the root level. And if you're at the root level, then that vibration actually comes up and connects with the abdominal level and all the other levels. And it's the only chakra that actually stretches. All the other chakras are basically in place. Actually, the Muslims, the Sufis, have 6 chakras. They stop at the genitals. They don't really recognize the root as a chakra per se, but it's a connection to the earth that can stretch through our whole pillar. And this is what Kundalini actually is. It is the earth at one with our bodies in union, a personalized little earth energy goddess inside of us that can actually stretch all the way to the highest point of consciousness. And when it does that, instead of going up and out and relieving whatever, if we can sustain that, because what yoga traditionally does is move from one chakra and then jumps to another, leaves the other ones below, they get cold, and then you jump to the higher one, forget about the lower ones, you jump to the higher one, and then you jump out. It's like hopping stairs and then diving off the cliff thinking you're going to fly when you're. So the whole point of it is that, just experiencing these energy sensations is going to put you in a frame of perception. And you can get that frame of perception through just being in the body, not just your body, but the body is an energy field. It's an emotion state. It's a mind state. You have mental body, spiritual body. All of these things are body, and so is physical body. And you can actually say, this is not an illusion. It's anything but. This is who I am. I've said this many times, and people are afraid.
It's not who I am. It's at least what I'm experiencing.
Exactly, but who I am is an abstract term there. Because even when you say spirit, what the fuck is that? Really? It's a I, but that's a sensation, isn't it? It's a feeling you have of awareness. It's a feeling of selfhood. The feeling of selfhood is who I am, but the feeling of selfhood is what I'm experiencing. Anyways, the point is that there is a locus of being, because the body is what contains experience. Without the body, the bodies, even the spiritual body, that essence that they say, oh, this is the truth, that's also an embodiment because it embodies the spiritual experience. It embodies the essence of unity. It's still a form, a dynamic, not a form, because it can be ultimately formless and void and whatever, but it's still a dynamic of experience. So body is that which contains and sustains and represents experience. So body is our means of perception. Now this is obvious, but the thing is, if you want to really manifest in this world, you need to include every level of body. And when you include the foundation, if you have a strong foundation, you can build anything on. So we don't act like millionaire playboys who the apartment complex is a pigsty, is a trash heap, is a toxic waste dump, but our penthouse apartment is a palace. And we bring all our friends and party in the penthouse while the toxic waste just oozes up out of the floorboards. That's not the way to go. You take care of your foundations. And you don't just take care of the foundations, but before you take care of anything else, you are sure your stance is an embodied one. And it's not easy, and I've spent a lot of time on this video to say this, but as you have this and you're feeling and your recognition of dissonance, if you can move into dissonance without, 90% of the pain of dissonance, and I'm not talking about being physically hurt, I'm talking about psycho-emotional dissonance, is in your head. 90 is caused by your head. It's caused by the story. The story is causing 90% of the dissonance. The rest is tension that is a chronic state that's also caused by some story that's been afflicting you, or a memory, or something that is not occurring in the present moment. In the present moment, you may be fine, but you still might feel the wounds of psychological, physical, mental events, a lot of things. So get out of the story. What I mean is that, okay, you're moving, you're feeling your body, and then you're starting to think of things. That's what meditation does. The only reason for quieting the mind is to get out of the storytelling, because the story then changes your perception frame. Look at what the cyclists are doing through the media. They're telling us stories that are altering our perception frame because we're buying into them. They're forcing us to invest. They're bankers. We're banking on their matrix. That is how they're harvesting energies. So you have the desire frame on the one hand and the perception frame, and this big gulf in between. And how do we bridge that gulf? This is where the paradox comes in, and I hope I'm not putting you to sleep, with what I'm saying. But the third attitude or frame to have is that the universe, reality, existence is good. It's benevolent. It is not evil. It is not out to get me. And it's operating perfectly at all times. This is the stance that it's a conducting stance. It is not a stance of evaluating experience, and it is not a stance of evaluating desire. It is a stance of conducting desire into experience. It is the stance that allows desire and experience to come together, because think about it. You do not want your desire to meet your perceptions unless it's in a context of a universe that loves you, that is benign, and that is operating perfectly at all times. So people say, oh, fake it till you make it. No, that is not the way things are. When you go to school and you learn something, you don't know it, but you're learning it. Are you faking it then? No, you're not faking it. When you practice an art, when you practice dancing in order to learn how to dance, are you faking it? No, you're exploring it. You're moving, you're creating it. You're creating that reality of being a dancer for yourself. So there is no faking. When you think that you're faking it, you're betraying your sensibilities. This is another story in your head. We're constantly betraying our sensibilities. I mean, it's so easy to do, and often in the name of coping. And many people argue because they feel, yes, spirituality, and many people argue because they feel, and I'm not mentioning specific examples. I don't want people to take this personally, even if it seems that way. But because it's general, it happens for me, you, and everybody. But people argue because they feel put on the spot, and they feel they're blamed for making a mistake. But nobody's making a mistake. This is part of the process. How can we point out differences, and how can we navigate? I mean, even the ambassador said, look, we're not here to blame each other. We're not here to put each other down. But how can you explore something that if you touch it, you're always stepping on somebody's toe? And you're only stepping on their toe because they're used to, well, I made a mistake, I have to face it, I have to say, I'm sorry, excuse me, and other people take advantage of that because you're weak, and then they cut you down, and I don't know what. Everybody's had experiences like that. And the thing is that the only way to get out of that frame and move into a frame where we can freely explore sensitive dynamics, because there's truth in many things. Again, I say each thing taken on its own merit. Even generalization cannot be an absolute. We cannot generalize everything and claim to be accurate. Even the statement that, well, either or, both and. Well, there may be cases where both and doesn't fit. There may be cases where, something there needs to be out of the picture completely. It doesn't fit at all. In the sense, hatred is not wrong, but And it's perfect because it's love reversed. So perfection isn't hatred, but the thing is, the experience of rape is not desire. So when you have a perception that causes you pain, it usually conflicts with your desire of what you truly want. And when it conflicts extremely, then there is pain and there is damage. There is body damage, there is energy body damage, there is mind body damage, there is emotion body damage, and this is the result of suffering because desire is the dynamic that holds everything together when love is present. And so abstract love isn't just going to cut it. It's fulfillment of desire that is the proof of love. It is the proof that we seek. Just say, oh, the universe loves you. You can be raped, you can be killed, you can be buried. Yes, it does. It's operating perfectly at all times. But unless my desire can conduct through that frame and into the frame of perception, and the frame of perception can move into the frame of experiencing the perfection of the universe continuously, and in all situations. Now, the thing is, well, what happens when you experience rape? Well, no. You see, it's going to experience this in internal situations first and build the reality from the inside out. Because there's no way that the outside reality can compact in on you suffering and you be able to sustain the framework of the universe is perfect and operating perfectly at all times. We're not structured for that because it's meaningless. It's meaningless to us to have an external reality that's painful to us, even if abstractly perfect in some roundabout way, unless our desires can alter that. You don't want to experience war. You don't want to fight for your survival. Nobody really does. We're always put in that position. So we stake our claim in our root chakra, and of course that's not enough. We move it through the rest of us. We honor all how stupid they are. It doesn't matter what our desires are. I want a harem, I want this, I want that. And then eventually the desire will start moving. And you'll realize that, let's move the possibilities back and forth. And then you experience things in life that give you hints of what it would be like to have that desire. Being on the beach perpetually with an umbrella, with a harem, everything gets boring. Really, you want to explore, you want to create, but you also want time to heal. And you can make that within yourself. So feel that stance. Here we can do separate my desires, my experience, which is superficial for most people. We're afraid to experience because we don't know that we can ever reach the state of perfection or even sustainability. So the body is much more powerful than we think. That's why the psychopaths are attacking it. They're attacking the gut, like I said, they're attacking the brain with the electromagnetic stuff, et cetera, the heart with other toxins and propaganda and this and that. But the point is the body, once you start loving it, really, really, really feeling the love of your being, and you really can't feel the love of the earth if you don't feel the love of the body down to the physical level. It's hypocrisy. I don't care if people bitch at me, tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, but really, really feel it. You'll feel an idea of love. Many people say, I love you to other people. They're actually projecting an idea. And it's good enough for them because it gives them a little warm feeling, but that warm feeling over time is not enough. Betrayal sets in the relationship, a need to go elsewhere, a need to do something else. We know these things. We've experienced them. Many people have experienced them. It's not some mystical state. So consider this, please. Consider that you can have your experience and your desire and this impossible, unrealistic, in quotations, zone of the universe is good and operating perfectly at all times. Because the present moment is hidden from us. Because we are not present in the moment. So the present moment may be perfect, but in order to create it, we need to stand from that position, even if thus we are learning, thus we are exploring. Thus is the adventure of paradox. Thank you once again for listening.
Thank you, Aristo. It was a difficult subject, and you've given us a lot to think about again. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week, and stay on the line. Thank you.
Thank you.